Today we read the Acknowledgement and Introduction. Acknowledgement. The authors wish to thank Robert Bly for his encouragement, Graciela Infante for her careful reading of the manuscript, Margaret Shanahan and Graciela Infante for the many helpful suggestions, Patrick Nugent for his absolutely accurate transcription of Robert Moore's lecture tapes, and the editorial and production staff of Harper San Francisco. In addition, we wish to offer special appreciation to the many men who have reflected on their personal experience in terms of this new approach to masculinity, psychology, overall masculine psychology, and have helped us to refine and deepen our understanding. Introduction. During Bill Moyers' recent interview with the poet Robert Bly, A Gathering of Men, a young man asked the question, quote, "Where are the initiated men of power today?" End quote. We have written this book in order to answer this question, which is on the minds of both men and women. In the late 20th centuries, we face a crisis in masculine identity of vast proportions. Increasingly, observers of the contemporary scene, sociologists, anthropologists, and depth psychologists are discovering the devastating dimensions of this phenomenon, which affects each of us personally as much as it affects our society as a whole. Why is there so much gender confusion today, at least in the United States and Western Europe? It seems increasingly difficult to point to anything like either a masculine or a feminine essence. We can look at family systems and see the breakdown of the traditional family. More and more families display the sorry fact of the disappearing father, which disappearance through either emotional or physical abandonment, or both, wreak psychological devastation on the children of both sexes. The weak or absent father cripples both his daughters and his sons' ability to achieve their own gender identity and to relate in an intimate and positive way with members both of their own sex and the opposite sex. But it is our belief and experience that we can't just point in any simple way to the disintegration of modern family systems. Important as this is, to explain the crisis in masculinity, we have to look at two other factors that underline this very disintegration. First, we need to take very seriously the disappearance of ritual processes for initiating boys into manhood. In traditional societies, there are standard definitions of what makes up what we call boy psychology and man psychology. This can be seen clearly in the tribal societies that have come under the careful scrutiny of such noted anthropologists as Arnold van Gennep and Victor Turner. There are carefully constructed rituals for helping the boys of the tribe make the transition to manhood. Over the centuries of civilization in the West, most all these ritual processes have been abandoned or have been diverted into narrower and less energized channels, into phenomena we can call pseudo initiations. We can point to the historical background for the decline of ritual initiation. The Protestant Reformation and the Enlightenment were strong movements that shared the theme of the discrediting of ritual process. And once ritual as a sacred and transforming process has been discredited, what we are left with is what Victor Turner has called mere ceremonial, which does not have the power necessary to achieve genuine transformation of consciousness. By disconnecting from ritual, we have done away with the processes by which both men and women achieved their gender identity in a deep, mature, and life-enhancing way. What happens to a society if the ritual processes by which these identities are formed become discredited? In the case of men, there are many who either had no initiation into manhood or who had pseudo-initiations that failed to evoke the needed transition into adulthood. We get the dominance of boy psychology. Boy psychology is everywhere around us, and it marks are easy to see, and its marks are easy to see. Among them are abusive and violent acting out behaviors against others, both men and women, passivity and weaknesses, the inability to act effectively and creatively in one's own life, and to engender life and creativity in others, both men and women, and often an oscillation between the two. Abuse, weaknesses, abuse, weakness. Along with the breakdown of meaningful ritual process for masculine initiation, a second factor seems to be contributing to the disillusion of mature masculine identity. This factor, shown to us by one strain of feminist critique, is called patriarchy. Patriarchy is the social and cultural organization that has ruled our Western world and much of the rest of the globe from at least the second millennium BCE to the present. Feminists have seen how male dominance in patriarchy has been oppressive and abusive of the feminine, of both the so-called feminine characteristics and virtues and virtues and actual women themselves. In their radical critique of patriarchy, some feminists conclude that masculinity in its roots is essentially abusive, and that connection with eros, with love, relatedness, and gentleness comes only from the feminine side of the human equation. As useful as some of these insights have been to the cause of both feminine and masculine liberation from patriarchal stereotypes, we believe there are serious problems with this perspective. In our view, patriarchy is not the expression of deep and rooted masculinity, for truly deep and rooted masculinity is not abusive. Patriarchy is the expression of the immature masculine. It is the expression of boy psychology and, in part, the shadow or crazy side of masculinity. It expresses stunted masculine fixated at immature levels. Patriarchy, in our view, is an attack on masculinity in its fullness, as well as femininity in its fullness. Those caught up in the structures and dynamics of patriarchy seek to dominate not only women but men as well. Patriarchy is based on fear, the boy's fear, the immature masculine's fear of women, to be sure, but also fear of men. Boys fear women. They also fear real men. The patriarchal male does not welcome the full masculine development of his sons or his male subordinates any more than he welcomes the full development of his daughters or his female employees. This is the story of the superior at the office who can't stand it that we are as good as we are. How often how often are we envied, hated, and attacked in direct and passive aggressive ways, even as we seek to unfold who we really are in all our beauty, maturity, creativity, and generativity. The more beautiful, competent, and creative we become, the more we seem to invite the hostility of our superiors or even our peers. What we are really being attacked by is the immaturity in human beings who are terrified of our advances on the road towards masculine or feminine fullness of being. Patriarchy expresses what we are calling boy psychology. It is not an expression of mature masculine potentials in their essence, in the fullness of their being. We have come to this conclusion from our study of ancient myths and modern dreams, from our examination from the inside of the rapid feminization of the mainline religious community, from our reflection upon the rapid changes in gender roles in our society as a whole, and from our years of clinical practice, in which we have become increasingly aware that something vital is missing in the inner lives of many of the men who seek psychotherapy. What is missing is not, for the most part, what many depth psychologists assume is missing. That is, adequate connection with the inner feminine. In many cases, these men seeking help had been and were continuing to be overwhelmed by the feminine. What they were missing was an adequate connection to the deep and instinctual masculine energies, the potentials of mature masculinity. They were being blocked from connection to these potentials by patriarchy itself and by the feminist critique upon what little masculinity they could still hold on to for themselves. And they were being blocked by the lack in their lives of any meaningful and transformative initiatory process by which they could have achieved a sense of manhood. We found, as these men sought their own experience of masculine structures through meditation, prayer, and what Jungians, those are members of Carl Jung's posse, Jungians call active imagination, that as they get more and more in touch with the inner archetypes of mature masculinity, they were increasingly able to let go of their patriarchal self and other wounding thought, feeling, and behavior patterns and become more genuinely strong, centered, and generative toward themselves and others, both women and men. In the present crisis in masculinity, we do not need, as some feminists are saying, less masculine power. We need more. But we need more of the mature masculine. We need more man psychology. We need to develop a sense of calmness about masculine power so we don't have to act out dominating, disempowering behavior toward others. There is too much standing and wounding of both. There is too much slandering and wounding of both the masculine and the feminine in patriarchy, as well as in the feminist reaction against patriarchy. The feminist critique, when it's not wise enough, actually further wounds an already besledged authentic masculinity. It may be that in truth, there never has been a time yet in human history when mature masculinity or mature femininity was really in ascendancy. We can't be sure of that. What we can be sure of is that mature masculinity is not in the ascendant today. We need to learn to love and be loved by the mature masculine. We need to learn to celebrate authentic masculine power and potency, not only for the sake of our personal well-being as men and for our relationships with others, but also because the crisis in mature masculinity feeds into the global crisis of survival we face as a species. Our dangerous and unstable world urgently needs mature men and mature women. If our race is going to go on at all into the future. Because there is little or no ritual process in our society capable of boosting us from boy psychology into man psychology. We each must go on our own with each other's help and support to the deep sources of masculine energy potentials that lie within us all. We must find a way of connecting with these sources of empowerment. This book, we hope, will contribute to our successful accomplishment of this vital task. Sounds like it's going to be a great book. And there's a lot in there that I resonate with. It is, like I said in a previous video, in the first video, is like, it's catastrophic to the development of a young man when he doesn't have a wise man around him, a mature man around him, and even a mature woman. Everything I say on this platform is going to be honest, and trust me, it is in my best efforts that I intentionally aim to not criticize anyone I mention, even someone that has harmed me, regardless of if it was intentional or not, because this is an educational platform, and that's my only aim. But the best way I can educate is through the grabbing on and analyzing my own life. And what comes up right now is that my mother was an unhealthy woman in my need of mature femininity. And she tapped into patriarchy more so than mature masculinity. To this day, she struggles with that dynamic. She uses language as a blue-collar, raw man that grew up with colorful language would do. And it's now because of my journey and my willingness to express what I'm being challenged by, what I'm learning, and sharing these revelations with her, that she is now kind of forced to reevaluate her behavior, her language, her approach to me, how she loves me, how she has loved me, including how she has not. So I'm excited about this book. We'll be back tomorrow with chapter 1, which is, I believe, boy psychology to man, from boy psychology to man psychology, part 1. And then chapter 1 is the crisis in masculine ritual process. I hope you'll join me tomorrow. See you then. Sun's going down. I gotta go home. Gotta go walk my dog.